Hello, welcome back to Kimchi Redneck's Kitchen. So today we are making one of my absolute favorite dishes growing up. And I cannot explain why, but my mom made it all the time. And it was one of my favorite things that mom made. I have no idea where she got the recipe. I'll go over what her recipe was and I'll show you my recipe. So mom's recipe is a super easy, simple one. She had 5 kids when we were growing up, so you kind of have to be able to make things kind of fast. It involved ground beef, a can of vegetarian vegetable soup from Campbell's. You had oatmeal and fresh green pepper and onion usually, mixed all together with an egg and put in the oven 350 for an hour, and you have meatloaf topped with ketchup. So that was mom's recipe. I loved it. I asked for it every single time I came home. However, now that I'm older, much older, I make it myself, and I make it a little bit different just because my tastes grew over time. And although if I'm feeling nostalgic, I will always go back to my vegetarian vegetable. But today, that is not the recipe I'm going. I'm gonna give you the recipe that I typically use when I'm making it, which involves some bacon and sauteing green peppers and onions and cheese. So let's get started. So this meatloaf I usually fix with mashed potatoes. So I'll be putting those on, and then I always serve lima beans with that because, well, butter beans, lima beans, those are Southern classics and my faves. So that is what we'll be having for dinner tonight. We'll get started by getting our meatloaf together, and then I'm gonna get our lima beans and our mashed potatoes started separately. The very first step that I wanna do is saute the green pepper and onion in about a tablespoon of butter. As you can see, all melty. I'll spread it around the pan. And now I'm just gonna add all of my onion and pepper. We're gonna get that sauteed. So literally what I'm doing here is I'm sauteing these at about a medium to medium high heat. And the purpose for that is because I want them to deepen the flavor. If I go ahead and saute them prior to putting them in the meatloaf, they will have a little bit more flavor developed into them. So that is my game plan. So that's what I'm working on now. We're gonna be sauteing for about 5 minutes, so we'll be back. All right, so what we've got going here, I have sauteed my onions and peppers. They've got a really good char on them. Not too charred, but just a little bit, enough that that flavor is going to help build flavor in the meatloaf. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're going to mix together our eggs. So you'll want 2 lightly beaten, and go ahead and put them in with your peppers. So you've got 2. And then you need about a sleeve of Ritz crackers, crushed. You need about a sleeve of them. I kept them in the sleeve to crush them, which means that some of those are going to be not as crushed as others, but I'm good with that. So mix that in really good. Then I'm going to add in a ½ teaspoon of salt and a ¼ teaspoon of pepper, which I put in the same bowl to save dishes. I'm my own dishwasher and I hate having to do dishes. And then the next step is going to be to add in the cheese and the milk. You need about a ¼ cup of milk. So that's a ¼ cup there. And about a ½ cup of cheese. And you mix all of that together first before you even get to adding in your ground beef. This is one of my perfect comfort foods, so I love doing this. The other step that I will do, which you'll see momentarily, is I will put bacon on the loaf pan to sort of wrap it in. It's not a perfect wrap, but pretty good wrap. All right, so now we're gonna incorporate all of this into our meat, and that is the game plan. You don't wanna work it too much, but you wanna get it in as much as possible. I usually end up having to do that with hands because the hands ends up being the easiest way to incorporate your ground beef with your mixture. Now the purpose of that Ritz cracker is gonna be to get in there and help bind everything together. So that's the game plan, is you want your meatloaf to stay in a loaf. And that's basically what we're doing here by trying to incorporate everything together, is making sure that we can get that perfect loaf. Now that cheese is gonna also help bind now too, because it will be nice and gooey and bindy. That is the plan. So I'm actually gonna put this in 2 loaf pans because I have 2 small loaf pans, and that way I can separate it out into 2 dishes. So this was 1 pound of ground beef. So that is what it's gonna look like. As you can see, I have 2 small loaf pans. So I'm going to split this into 2 and make a loaf into each. You can start forming that loaf as you get it out of the bowl. But I also try to leave a little bit of space around it because we want to give it some room. There will be grease, so you want to give it some room for the grease. So little tiny bit of space around it at the ends for that grease. And also I will add topping to this, but I usually do that at the 30-minute mark. Growing up, the topping that we usually used was just a simple ketchup, which was really good, but I know some people like to do barbecue sauce, some people do ketchup and brown sugar. The one I'm gonna use is a little bit of ketchup, some mustard, and some brown sugar together for a nice good flavor. But again, like I said, I'm putting that on at around the 30-minute mark. So this bacon is gonna help get another level of flavor into it. These cook for 30 minutes before I put on the topping, and then another 30 minutes after. At the 30-minute mark, I'll also check what my levels are for grease in there. If you were not feeling like sauteing your peppers and onions, you do not have to do that. I have many times made this with just fresh green pepper and onion. It does make a little bit of a difference. Your green pepper and onion tend to be a little bit more crunchy versus sauteed with the extra flavor in. You can use yellow bell pepper, green pepper, red pepper, it doesn't matter. So now we're gonna put these in the oven for 30 minutes at 350, and then we'll be back. All right, if it's looking a little steamy over here, that's because our butter beans are boiling, so they're making a little bit of steam. We're gonna make our topping for our meatloaf real quick, and to do that, we will take half a cup of ketchup, 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, and a teaspoon of regular yellow mustard. We will whisk that together, and then at the 30-minute mark, we will top that onto our meatloaf and let it cook for another 30 minutes. So there you go. All right, so the next step is gonna be to start putting our glaze on. These have been in at 30 minutes. They're not cooking up a whole lot of grease, but that does not surprise me because I ground my own meat and it was not a very fatty meat.
Bacon.
Meatloaf with bacon, that bacon gives an extra smoky flavor, so even if you didn't get the slice of bacon on your piece of meatloaf, it's still there. Don't you think?
I don't think.
Really?
I just react.
All right, well, putting a lot on this one. Mostly because I want to use all of it. I don't really want to save any of it. All right. We're back in the oven at 350 for another half hour. So let's get our meatloaf served up here. Get under there and see if I can get... Hey, that actually served relatively nicely.
Yeah, in its cute little pans.
You like my cute little pans? All right, so I normally still put ketchup on the table because I honestly still occasionally ketchup with mine. It's there in case you need it. Like I said earlier, for our sides, we've got our butter beans. This is a total Southern meal here, right, Chuck?
Yep, good old country cooking.
Meatloaf and mashed taters, right?
Yep.
And butter beans. And I did the whole thing my mom used to do with her mashed potatoes. I put a little paprika on it, just because it's pretty. Let's give this a try. The one thing I did like about the one that my mom made, the easy one, is, not to lie, it had a lot of veggies in it. So the one with the vegetarian vegetable soup has a lot of veggies in it. This just has basic green pepper and onion in it, but still a lot of flavor. And that bacon and the cheese give it extra flavor as well. Bacony, cheesy goodness.
Yep, the sauce on it thickened up and caramelized well, gives it a good flavor.
It has a little bit of a crust on it.
Bacon's cooked to a nice chewy stage, so it's not too hard.
Some of it, except at the top, is a little bit more charred than others. But it's also a good extra layer of flavor and texture for it. I was telling them earlier that I like to do the saute on the peppers and onions because otherwise they don't really cook if you don't saute them first. They're just crunchy bell pepper and onion, which is also good.
Also, they don't really get any other flavor. They just kind of disappear into the meat.
So like doing the saute before you put it in really just kind of bumps their flavor textures up. Yeah, so whenever I went to college, if I was coming home on the weekend, Mom always knew to make my mashed potatoes and meatloaf. It was a necessity. And well, butter beans are always needed.
Beans and bacon are beans and bacon. You can't really go wrong with that.
Another Southern classic from the Kimchi Redneck's kitchen, our homemade meatloaf.
So yes, you can cook home food in
And we do.
It is possible.
All the time.
The The global market, the world's not as big as it once was.
You can actually make larger portions of this too, and you can actually make this in a 9x13 or 8x8 pan if you want to do it that way. You just have to keep an eye on it so that it doesn't overcook. Yeah, these are our only loaf pans because I always make mini loaves. Like, subscribe, do the internet thing. Let us know if there's something else you want us to cook or to try, or you'd like to know what else we are skilled at here, because you don't get to look like we do without having some kitchen skills. Am I wrong? Yeah, we have kitchen skills. That's our problem.
Never trust a skinny chef.
Yeah, skinny chefs lie because they clearly don't eat their own food. And if they do, then it might not be good. So you can trust us because we're not skinny at all.
We definitely eat our own food.
Foodies. It's the life of a foodie. Unless the skinny chef, I will say this, I have seen some skinny chefs that eat and eat and eat and eat and just can't gain weight. In that case,
unless they're one of those metabolic freaks that just
you gotta love a metabolic
weight.
freak. I do love the chefs that you can tell they eat their food because they do eat their food, but they don't gain any weight. I've seen a few. Not a whole lot, but there are a few. All right.
Other than that, it's time for us to eat dinner.
We're eating dinner.
Bye.